Oh my gosh, B. This was... Oh. These people are supposed to be representing pro-lifers, and all I hear is... This guy is like, no, that's not what I was saying. Just answer the question.
That was an excellent impersonation of Beaker from the Muppets. Me. I don't know whose was better.
All right, guys, welcome back to Red Top Report. I'm your host, Joe Enders, and we're going to be breaking down the disgusting, embarrassing pro-life versus pro-abortion debate between Destiny, Lila Rose, and Kristan Hawkins. And joining me to talk about this is somebody vastly more qualified than me to talk about this subject. I think we can agree with that, Ronan. Dr. William Mahoney.
Hey, Joe, I don't know if I'm vastly more qualified.
Oh, come on.
I don't know if I'd say that.
I'm qualified to be loud and obnoxious.
No comment.
So yeah, I mean, I know we've watched some clips from the debate, and I think it's important to understand that I think they were prepared to go in there and think that this guy was an abortion extremist who was going to say that you can get an abortion anytime up until birth. And when he came back and started saying, oh, actually, no, I don't, it just seems like everything fell apart. What is your initial reaction?
To the whole thing?
Yeah, just the whole thing.
I mean, I thought that, let's start with, I think they're right and he's wrong, but then there's how you present that, right? And I think that he was doing a much better job presenting his side than they were presenting ours. So that was my main take. I felt like, I don't want to like judge these people, so because I'm glad that they're out there doing this, but I thought that Lila Rose did better overall. I thought Kristan Hawkins was a little bit, it was very emotive. Her responses were so emotive, and he wants to have a debate with you. So okay, you can. There's a time and place to show emotion and to saying killing babies is bad. Yeah, there's a time and place for that, but that's not what this was. The forum that this was a debate, and the guy wanted to bring up the points and hear counterpoints and see if you could convince him or if he could convince you.
I think you're right. I think you're saying something similar in fewer words, but I think that was just a flat out embarrassment. I thought they made pro-lifers look stupid. Now we have clips from the debate that we're going to pull up. Ronan, you have those clips, right, dude? And so what we're going to do is we're going to give our reaction to those clips and kind of make the arguments the way they should have been made, I think, in some cases, and in other cases, react to the areas in which Lila and Kristan were deficient. So do we got that first clip?
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you think it's okay to kill someone when they're unconscious? No, because I said capacity to deploy consciousness.
What do you mean by capacity to deploy
consciousness? As in all of the parts in your brain are functioning and working and can deploy a conscious experience.
So an embryo who is developing their brain will absolutely have the capacity to
Will implies
but
doesn't.
Why are you being age discriminatory against that child for not having the ability to develop?
The pieces for a building are not the same thing as a building itself. A seed is not the same thing as a tree. An embryo is not the same thing as a person.
No, you're
so when you say, hold on, stop saying that every single. Okay, hold on. To be clear to the audience, when you're having a conversation with somebody, if you're having a conversation with me and they're not willing to engage with a single hypothetical, or they claim every hypothetical doesn't map on, unless you can clearly explain why, it's because you know that the hypothetical is testing the limits of your belief in a way that demonstrates the absurdity of what you're saying.
And you don't
first of all, whether or not pro or anti-life exists has nothing to do with science. It's not a scientific question. It's a question of moral philosophy. I can ask a very simple question.
Was there injuries?
A person is in a bed. The doctor.
So, okay, so I kind of want to break down that first part. First off, I think my initial reaction to that is he was talking about the seed analogy, and I just on its face, that's a very poor analogy to make when he's talking about consciousness, because a seed would be like a sperm cell and an egg. Those are the seeds to what becomes human life. Now, the seed literally is, people literally call sperm the seed, a man's seed.
Right.
And he's talking about that. And then the other thing he analogized was a building in this. Well, buildings are not people. They don't grow. They're not a developing, living thing. Both of those analogies were weak. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought analogies were definitely weak. He actually makes a correct point, which that we're in the realm of moral philosophy at this point. That's actually correct.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, if you're talking about empirical science. Now, and this is where I mean, if I were responding to him, I would have set up something more fundamental before I started trying to tackle his points. There's two ways to argue. One, of course, is like, I'm responding to every point you're making, and I'm just trying to show you how it's wrong. But I've not necessarily proven my side by doing that. So I would have just kind of ignored the bad analogies and said, I mean, that's how I would have done it. And I would have said, you're correct about the moral philosophy and there's different types of knowledge. Okay, so science, I would have said, let's be real fundamental here. Science is scientia, which is Latin, which simply means knowledge. Yeah. And there's many sources of human knowledge. And so philosophy is a science technically because it's a source of human knowledge. Now, when they're talking about science, they mean it in the terms of empirical science, what can be weighed, what can be measured, all that, right? And that's in fact, when you are talking about the morality of abortion, you are not in the realm of the empirical sciences. It touches on the empirical sciences. So it's definitely part of the equation, but it's not the whole debate. It's broader than that because we have to pull from different sources of our human knowledge to make the case in favor against abortion. So I would have started with that so that you have to be clear about your terminology and you have to be clear about the field we're debating on. So you can't say, so on the one hand, I wouldn't say, you can't make the argument empirical science, therefore abortion is okay, which is what the left does. That doesn't even make sense. Right. But you also can't do that to oppose them. Empirical science, therefore abortion's bad. That doesn't quite work either. You have to take more into consideration, like moral philosophy. So that was kind of how I would have started with that, rather than trying to jump on whatever.
Now, what would you say? What would you say in response to him saying that he says personhood begins when one has the capacity to be conscious?
Well, I thought she was correct to say, what do you mean by capacity? I thought that was correct because that was probably her best point. What do you mean by capacity? So I would ask him to define his terms. So I'm not sure what he means by that. So if you mean, like, and again, now we're into philosophy. You're talking about potency versus act. So the human being, even though the brain's not fully developed yet, certainly has the potency for that. Yeah. We know for sure if we just let the brain keep developing, it's going to become actualized. So that part's definitely the case. So are you saying that you have to actualize it, or that you have to have the potential? See, this is where I would try to make distinctions with him. Yeah, because one's like, clearly the child in developing whose brain isn't completely formed yet certainly has the potential, as Lila pointed out. So I would have just made him, you would have made him
flesh that out a little bit.
Flesh that out better, because I don't really know what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think what he's trying to say is that an unconscious person in a coma, they still have that capacity. And then at no point does a fetus before 20 to 24 weeks. So that's his main argument, right?
Because the brain's not developed, so da-da-da. Okay. Right. Well, okay, so there, again, he's assuming materialism in the sense that there's only matter, there's nothing spiritual. So that's an assumption there as well. So that's the other thing I would have been like, why do you conclude that there's only matter and not?
Well, that was I think his weakest point. Yeah. His weakest point there was when he conceded that it's a question of moral philosophy.
He's correct.
But you're right. That's the thing. He's correct, and he has to concede it. But his materialism is now flushed down the toilet once you bring in the question of moral philosophy.
So that's actually a great point. Yeah. Because you now are relying on the very thing that you're saying doesn't exist to establish that it doesn't exist. Now you're in psycho world.
Well, it's circular reasoning, and that's that's exactly what he's engaging in, which he would even concede is a logical fallacy.
It's not correct, exactly.
Want to continue playing it? Let's keep reacting. Let's see what else he has to say.
Has a machine and he pushes the button and the machine says this person will never wake up again. But the rest of their body works. There's no button like that exists. That's why it's called a hypothetical.
Then it's hypothetical, Destiny, because it doesn't exist in the real world. And you're using it to justify ending the life of an embryo.
You can't adjust this.
Or a human being.
I win this debate de facto. If you're incapable of dealing with hypothetical, then the conversation is like...
we can deal with hypothetical.
You can't. A hypothetical, by definition, is something that is not happening. That's why it's called a hypothetical.
Destiny. So wait. Let me ask you a hypothetical.
Yeah, this is okay. So I'm gonna just go out here and say Destiny's absolutely right here. That was like, what is Lila talking about here?
It was a unique exchange. She's very passionate about the topic, and that's good. I'm happy, but I think you can't let your passions override.
Which is what happened
what
there.
He's saying, yeah,
it doesn't exist, so it can't. Okay.
She first said that doesn't. she basically started by rejecting the hypothetical and then saying, "But I'm open to hypotheticals." But you just rejected the hypo. I mean, that was.
And this goes to show that the problem here is not that Destiny is right and that pro-lifers are losing the pro-life debate. The problem is that the people up there are so poorly representing the position that it doesn't come like I don't even know what they're arguing. I know exactly what Destiny's arguing, and Destiny is just battering them with.
That's sad.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not a reflection on the truth of abortion and why it's intrinsically wicked.
Exactly.
It's just that they're not representing it well.
And the problem, I think the problem is that both of them are Catholic. They're both of them are Catholic to my knowledge. If they're not, Ronan, feel free to correct it. But I'm almost positive.
Well, I know Lila.
Lila's Catholic. I'm almost certain that Kristan Hawkins is also Catholic. Okay. They're supposed to be representing on a world stage the Catholic position on life. The fact that you didn't brush up enough to know exactly what the church teaches, to know exactly how we can argue this question from a natural moral philosophy perspective. You don't need to bring in the popes on this one. You don't need to bring in any of that stuff on there, and you could if they made a natural moral philosophy argument, but it's not necessary. The issue of abortion is a natural law issue. It's not an issue of supernatural faith.
Of course.
And I think you'd agree with that. So
no, I think the church agrees with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I don't need to know that God's a trinity of persons to know that abortion's wrong. I mean,
exactly.
The church, of course, confirms that,
right,
and makes that abundantly clear, but you can know that through reason. I mean, of course, you can come to that through natural law. In fact, I would say like even this country's founded on the principle of natural law, for better or for worse.
Absolutely.
But as far as that goes, I mean, they understood that they broke away from Great Britain based on a moral philosophy of natural law. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got next, Ronan? Let's just keep reacting. Let's see what else is going on in this debate.
We're only allowed to call a human life a child at Destiny's arbitrary line of consciousness. Because you're very offended when we use this term, so I'm trying to understand when it is in your book correct to use it.
If anybody's triggered in this room, it is not me.
Yeah, so that's wrong. When he said consciousness began, that's not really arbitrary. I think you would agree with that too. Around 20 to 24 weeks is when this thing becomes conscious. I think that Lila is strawmanning him.
Well, obviously, if you don't have a brain yet. I mean, if you're in the embryonic stage, you're just you're still only so many cells or whatever, you don't have a brain yet, then I would say probably you're not conscious by the way he's defining it. I don't think that means you're not human. Obviously.
But the consciousness thing that he's talking about is correct. Right. And this is why they're losing the argument, because he's saying something that's right, but they're arguing the wrong argument entirely.
Yeah, and it seems like it seems that they're so revved up, like we're debating now, so they will not concede any points to him. And that's not a good way to debate. You have to concede. If he's right, he's right.
Yep.
So
and he was right there.
You argue to that.
So it's funny that you keep using the offended line.
You disagree strongly.
No, I don't disagree. You're just like presupposing the argument. That's the issue.
It's pissing you off when we use the word child. Is what we're saying.
I know you guys get frustrated when people argue with you and you're like, you just want to take rights away from the mom. Oh, so you're trying to make moms slaves? You're turning moms into baby factories? Yeah. That would be, if I wanted to engage in the same style of conversation you're engaging in, I would just say that over and over again. Why do you want to make moms baby factories? Why do you want to make moms slaves? You know what is really problematic is when we take away rights from certain groups of people and we force them to do things with their bodies that they don't want to. A lot of was done that way. A lot of the concentration camps done that way. In Japan, Unit 343 did a lot of weird things like that or whatever. Right? So if you're gonna make the argument that like, oh well, viewing people as people sometimes and not as really problematic, then I'll say, okay, well, restricting rights from people, especially women, has also been really problematic historically. So, welcome to women's suffrage. Welcome to women being able to own property. Welcome to women having access to birth control.
Thank you for explaining women's rights.
No problem. I'll do it since you guys have the problem with the understanding. But I'm saying I'm not doing that because that's boring to me. Because obviously, if you guys thought that a fetus wasn't a human life, then you would obviously agree with me. And if I agreed that a fetus was a human life, I would obviously agree with you.
When does the fetus become a human being, Dustin?
The personhood comes when the conscious experience starts, which is about 24 weeks.
Wait. Biology says moment of conception, life begins.
Biology does not tell you.
Stop. Excuse me.
Biology does not tell you when
I'm going to start talking to you like I talk to my 4 boys. Excuse me. Human life comes into existence at the moment of conception.
Kristan, one second.
I mean, just like when you're really not doing well in a debate when you say things like, I'm going to talk to you like I talk to my 4-year-old boys.
You're sitting in front of a grown man.
That is so condescending and stupid. And it's one thing if you're at the water cooler with this guy, it's not a recorded debate and, you're teasing with each other, your friends, that's totally different. But you're representing more than yourself at this point when you're in this debate. So to be snarky like that, I don't know, it's just...
Yeah.
What cringy.
Yeah. Once again, I think Destiny was making a distinction, and he actually made a serious error in his logic there, because what he wound up doing was he said that it begins at consciousness. Right,
personhood does. He didn't say human life.
Yeah, he says personhood begins at consciousness. However, human life does begin at conception. They're trying to make him admit, okay, and all he says is, well, yes, I do believe that, and that is a scientific fact. But I don't really care if it's a human life, if it's not conscious, because I feel that that's when they become a person. Now, the error in his logic is that he actually does presuppose that. That should be where the debate went. That should have been what they were talking about. But instead, we wound up in this place where they're just like, haha, I got you to admit that it's a human life. I mean,
I think that too. Yeah, they should have it's a lot to respond to. There was a lot in that exchange, but their responses were trying to, everything he said, they were trying to pick apart while he was saying it. And that's also just a bad debate tactic. Yeah. All you have to do is sit and listen. Let him give his whole thing, and then you find what's correct and what's wrong about what you're saying. Yep. Why are you wrong about this? Where are you right? I mean, that's how you, and then you pick it apart. But they were basically trying to out-talk him, it seemed, and that's just that's not a debate. That's just a show where you bring someone on, you beat them up.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Bill O'Reilly used to do. I used to hate watching him because you'd bring a guy on and then talk over him the whole time. It's like, why do you have him on as a guest?
Yeah, and Destiny's one of those guys. I mean, you can tell that he's very good at keeping his train of thought while he's being interrupted and keeping it all linear and stuff. And like I said, honestly, I give honestly, great job to Destiny for being able to argue through that. I mean, he's doing a really good job keeping his arguments linear despite being back and forth in the background. Now, and I do also agree with just from a tactical perspective how weak it was that they were just saying, oh, you're just like a Nazi. Oh, you're just like a this. Oh, you're just like a this. Whatever. Who freaking cares? We're talking about moral philosophy and the concepts of moral philosophy. Why didn't you make it about that?
Exactly. I'm a more fundamental point here, and that is that debating is a skill.
Yeah.
It's even if you're right and you have a lot of good information, you might even be wise.
Yeah.
But debating is a skill. And when I was in philosophy, we practiced it a lot. I did a master's in philosophy, and we had to debate a lot because it is a skill set. And it's somewhere between the truth, and there's some rhetoric involved as well. But the rhetoric has to be used kind of lightly. But it is a skill, and they clearly are not trained in debate. Let's put it that way. And I just think that this is a difficulty with nonprofits in general, is that you have the face of the nonprofit. So in Students for Life of America, it's Kristan Hawkins, and for what is it, Live Action News? Is it called?
I think it's Live Action.
Live Action, yeah. And you have Lila Rose, okay, and they're great, and they do some good work in their own fields. But the face of your organization should not necessarily be the one who's debating and this and that. They might be great at giving talks and at a conference but if you're going to be in a debate out there, hire someone on your team who's really good at debating.
I'm actually gonna depart a little bit from what you're saying.
Sure.
You're right about what you're saying.
Yeah.
But no, I actually don't think that they belong even doing those things. To be perfectly honest with you, giving talks, doing all those other things, they're never going to be as good at that as a guy like Destiny. Destiny has all of his facts straight. He can argue in a linear way. He can write in a way that's rhetorically nice and witty and fun and all those things. They're demonstrating that if they can't even string that up in their own heads, that when they write it down, yes, they might be able to give a somewhat inspiring speech. But the people that they're going to inspire are not the people that Destiny is going to inspire. They're going to inspire women. These are women that are good at talking to women about abortion and appealing to women about abortion. And when you do compare this to be like, well, this is what the Nazis did. This is what slavers did. This is what this does. A woman can understand that. A woman will be able to understand that. But when you're in a debate setting where it is clearly, because women are not even close to as into debates as men are when it comes to internet views. You go look that up. That's obviously, I mean, that's obviously true.
As far as like what popularity?
Well, popularity-wise, yeah. Men are the ones watching debates. Men are the ones trying to logically figure out what's going on. They're more interested in that than the emotive, the emotive, sensationalized, rhetorical stuff that women would be attracted to. And I think that you really see that shine through in this debate, because the women are arguing the way that they would be talking to women, and the man is making a linear argument that's based on, reason and trying to keep that consistent. And because of that, they're not able to keep up, and they're just getting basically bulldozed the entire time. Now, we have one more clip, right, Ronan?
My basic stance is we try to figure out what is a person, what makes a person. Person is granted some positive.
So this is Destiny's opening statement. So he's going to kind of flesh out his opinion there, and then we can kind of break it down and try to figure it out.
Sorry, what is that? Why does he have a doll sitting next to him?
I don't know why the whatever podcast has had that thing up there for a while. I think it's freaky and creepy.
Really
I don't
creepy.
like it at all, but it is what they have on set.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Some negative rights by governments, and probably morally and ethically separate from governments, we also grant people some type of right. I don't believe that a person is a collection of cells. I don't believe that a person is just a body with a brain. I think that very specifically when we speak about a person, we speak about something that has the capacity to deploy a conscious experience, because that tends to be the thing that we're usually talking about when we're figuring out if somebody's alive or dead, or whether or not somebody ought to be protected. When we say a person, when we say who is suffering, we don't say what is suffering. We're not talking about a body. We're not talking about a heartbeat. We're talking about a person having an experience. So when I try to think of abortion, I try to think of who is being harmed. I would say that for 20 to 24 weeks, that's about when the scientists say that the brain has all the parts necessary to begin communicating, to have a conscious experience, that about at that point, there is some experience there that we can speak of as a who or as a person. But prior to that, the first trimester, that really experience is not happening yet. So if you want to have an abortion, there is no who that's being harmed. There's just a what, which is whatever the body is up to that point. So generally, I'm pro-choice in first abortion up until that conscious experience has been formed, because I think that's what's worth protecting, because that's when we look to see when somebody's dead. So that's what we should look to see when somebody's alive.
So what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think he's wrong, obviously. Yeah. But I think it's good that he's at least thought this through. He's not just going.
He used to be pro-life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's not just going through giving me some leftist bumper sticker slogan or some nonsense. So I think it's good that he thought it through. Of course, he needs to think it through some more. Of course. But I think, and this will probably not be a popular take, but I look at this a little bit differently. I think the personhood argument is so how do I explain this? I think when you start talking about it's okay to kill this child, this embryo, let's say this embryo, based on whether or not is a person, is not correct. I don't think that you need to prove personhood not to kill this child. So, and I think that the left put the burden of proof on us, and the burden of proof should be on them. So, for example, when they came up with the whole trimester thing at Roe versus Wade, they were like, we don't want to get into philosophical questions and this and that. And then they gave a very philosophical breakdown of when they're, right. So by doing that, what they did was they put the burden of proof of personhood on the pro-lifers rather than the people who were okay with committing abortion. So they screwed it all up. And I don't think either side will ever win that debate, because I think there's an aspect of personhood that's just mysterious. Okay, there's just something mysterious about being a person. Yeah. And you can come to a certain understanding in philosophy and revelation. We can learn more. Through revelation, we know that I'm made in the image and likeness of God. I know that Jesus is my redeemer, and so on and so forth. But there's some mystical aspect that you're never, ever going to have a syllogism that tells you what a person is. You're just not. Yeah. So you can say, well, consciousness. Well, what about when you're sleeping? What about when you're in a coma? What about blah, blah, blah? And, you can go crazy trying to. You're never going to say, this is what makes a person, boom, syllogism, done. It's not going to happen. And I think the devil's very smart, which is why he manipulated the left or they participated with them to throw the burden of proof on us, because you can't prove it. That's the point. You can point to characteristics. There's an intellect, there's a will. I mean, you can give and you can know things through philosophy and revelation, but to sit there and define personhood, good luck. So that being said, and then I'll get into my point. In my opinion, all you have to prove is that this is a biological human being at whatever stage of development. And once you've done that, checkmate. I'm going to assume that the human being at any stage of development is a person, because I've never met a human being who's not a person. I don't know what the heck you're talking about if you say otherwise. And now the burden of, and if you want to make it about personhood, well, let's assume this is a person, and then you prove to me how it's not. And that's how I would say, if that's what you want to make the argument.
Well, what about when he brings up like the corpse?
What does he say about the corpse?
He just brings up a corpse as a counterexample to what you would be saying. He's like, so if it's a biological human being, but it's dead. And this
well, there you go. Then it's dead, but the embryo is living. What's his point?
Sure. Well, his point is that the consciousness or the what do you say, the capacity for consciousness the capacity for a conscious experience is what he said. And a dead person has no capacity for a conscious experience. But the question,
but the body's dead too. An embryo is a living body in an early stage of development.
I would agree with that.
So it doesn't really work.
But let's say this goes to the bigger moral question, and it's something that really shocked me because it wasn't even brought up. The soul. Why wasn't the soul brought up at all? And especially after the concession that this was a question of moral philosophy.
Right.
The soul, the existence or non-existence of the soul in philosophy, it's not a religious question. It's obviously believed by almost every group that believes in spirituality because it's a spiritual aspect of the human person. But it's always been an issue of natural moral philosophy with the existence of the soul. And he's trying to argue this thing arbitrarily when the soul enters the body, and he just assumes that it's at this point
of consciousness.
Consciousness.
That's another argument I wouldn't even bother with. I don't have to show you that the soul entered the body, because let's say. And I'm not saying this. I think your soul is spontaneous with your biological creation. I think there's spontaneous. But once upon a time, some medieval theologians thought that it was whatever many months into it and all. But even if that were the case, let's say it's not until the second trimester that your soul just gets infused. Even so, this is still a living body. Are you morally okay to destroy it? So I'll come up with a weird example, a hypothetical that I know that Lila won't like that, but here's a hypothetical. Okay, so Adam. So God prepares Adam. He molds him from the dust of the earth and then breathes the breath of life into him. So while he's molding him, and the devil comes along and just steps on the sandcastle, that's okay. God's okay with that. No, of course not, because he's making this so that he can, right. So once the body's being made, God's already made his will clear. He's already made his will clear. This is now a living being, and clearly you're not free to destroy it. So
that's a very interesting point. Now, I do believe that the Catholic position is that it's at conception when the soul is unified with the body.
Yeah,
exactly. So we're on a theological.
I think that's true. I'm just saying I don't think you have to prove that.
That's actually really interesting.
Right. Yeah, so that's my take.
I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But even I'd still want to bring that up to him, because what he's basically saying is that you're saying this is an argument of natural moral philosophy, and yet you are going to be throwing out Aristotle, you're going to be throwing out Plato, you're going to be throwing out Augustine, you're going to be throwing out Aquinas.
Western civilization.
You're going to be throwing out Western civilization entirely, because you're arbitrarily making this point about the existence of a soul coming in at the moment of consciousness, which doesn't. Which I don't think I'm trying to think. Go back to my
actually. You're throwing out Eastern civilization too.
You're throwing out humanity's collective wisdom. You're throwing out humanity's collective wisdom over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And what is the reasoning for that? Mm-hmm. And let's be perfectly honest, because you think women should be allowed to have sex without any consequences. And the real question you have to ask from a moral philosophy perspective is, doing that moral?
Of course. Right.
And then the answer is no.
Right. Yes. I think that's correct.
So
I want to make, I agree with what you're saying. I want to make one more point about arguing for this with abortion in America again. So I don't think all I have to show is the beginning of your biological existence, as far as I'm concerned. Once that God's made his will clear, there's a body in development. I assume it's certainly a human being, right? Because an embryo is not a dog. We get that. This is a human being at an early stage of development. I assume personhood. Why wouldn't I? And move on. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, and I'm not saying it's not a religious document, but it is based on natural law, and it was the whole reason this country broke from Great Britain and so on and so forth. it says that all men are created equal. Da 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 da. Listen carefully to the word. All men are created equal, not born equal. It says created. And we know the moment of your creation is when you biologically begin to exist. Now we have a new creation. Done.
Right.
That's it. And now you have an inalienable right from God.
And we've also, and we know that, I know that the Declaration of Independence isn't binding law, but it tells you what the moral philosophy of the nation is based off of. And that's what his question is. So he's saying, he's talking about America. If you want these laws in America, if you want to base it off the Declaration of Independence, it is based off of natural law. All law in the United States actually defers back to the British common law if there is no existing United States law to follow it at the time. And that was all based on natural law, which is rooted in Catholic moral philosophy.
Sure. And though the Declaration of Independence is not technically considered binding law, I understand, but like whereas the Constitution is
a statement of our moral philosophy.
Not only that, they're called the Charters of Freedom. Like it's part of a bigger package. This is the moral philosophy behind why we're writing the Constitution. So to read them separate from each other is incredibly stupid. So I understand you can't use it as law, but it was good enough to be in a war to break off from Great Britain, and then the Constitution came later. So this is the philosophy why we wrote the Constitution. You must read them together.
Exactly.
So
you know, moral philosophy of this nation, it talks about, you know, being created equal. It talks about all of these different things, and we just have to look at this all as a package deal. Destiny's wrong. Lila and Kristan, they failed to make these basic philosophical arguments. Like, I have a degree in philosophy, you have a PhD in Marian theology. We have all of this knowledge sitting here right now.
I know.
Destiny, anytime, buddy. Anytime, buddy. And you know what? And that's really all I got to say about it. He did a good job. I think that was the best pro-choice debate I've ever seen, you know, from his perspective. Pro-abortion debate, obviously. But yeah, I mean, and I don't think there really is anything else that
it reminds. I just want to say one last thing before then. It reminds me of when I was taking math as a kid in school, and it's like you might stumble across the right answer, but your equation's not quite right.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you might be pretty good at the equation, but get the wrong answer. And that's what I think of this debate. It's like Lila and Kristan have the right answer, but they're way they got there or trying to get there is not quite right.
Doing some creepy
whereas his
algebra.
Equation's better, but his answer's wrong. So,
exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. And you gotta find all of it. And well, anyways, thank you for coming on and talking to us about this, B. It's always great to have you on. Thanks. You are a wealth of knowledge. Well, guys, that's all we got for this episode of Red Top Report. So you need to follow us on Instagram. You need to follow us on Twitter. And you need to subscribe to the channel, guys. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notifications bell so you know when we're dropping new content. Oh, yeah, and one more thing. In order for this show to keep going, you need to give us your money.
I gotta do it, man.
And you can give us your money by going to buymeacoffee.com. You could do a single donation, or you could do a monthly Joe for Joe donation for only $5 a month. Links in the description. Give it a click. And with that said, guys, that's all we got for this episode. God bless.